But even with BLM and even with LGBT rights and the fact you said that most of the people in the US, for example, say that there are only two genders, even those who vote Democrat, in a way that doesn't really matter, because the problem what people have with it is usage of force. So how the left uses force when people say something that doesn't go along with their agenda. So for example, even if somebody has said, I'm whatever, a man, a woman, in between, nobody really cares that much. I've never met a person which would have said, well, I would have a problem with a person just because he's he's considering himself to be uh, another identity.
Yeah.
The problem with this is that it becomes defining to the person, and some people just gain from the fact that they are whatever gender or whatever identity. I think it shouldn't be the thing, and people, this is what most of these things are going wrong in. For example, in my university, we this topic was very much brought up in student union, and one of our transgender students, which I get along with very well, and is I have no problem with him at all, but he has introduced an idea of reserving special seats in the within the assembly for LGBT only. So the idea was 6 seats for LGBT community members in the assembly, which is 50 people. So it's you can imagine it's more of 10%, right, of the assembly, which is quite a big proportion. And first question that comes to my mind is whether that's proportional to the amount of LGBT people in the university. And the second thing is, even if it is in a way proportionate, then would that be rational to give these people this reserved seats? Because then Ukrainians will demand their own seats, then other minorities will demand their own seats, and you can't really say that a certain group has experienced significantly more problems than the other group, because uh, black people have been impacted by slavery. Uh, LGBT people.
Well, I think it's important also to distinguish the situation of minorities in American Britain. People confuse them a lot, and that's a mistake. Slavery was of course, British Empire did slavery before banning slavery. But most black migrant communities in the UK, they've gone through a lot. I'm not denying that, but it wasn't slavery. Their issues, the oppression which they did face, is a different issue from that in America. So I cut you off there, but please continue.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to mention. That we can't just designate seats to people, assuming that they have experienced more problems than other communities. And for example, this is a very good example with disabled people who you can't see them on social media complaining too much about their problems. But actually, I could see one of the cashiers in my shop, who has one arm and another arm is kind of supporting, but it's cut in half.
And I think that there is something very infuriating about privileged middle class LGBTQ people or people from certain racial minorities complaining about these issues when you have people who may or may not be from a minority who deal with poverty, with actual problems into their living conditions, living paycheck to paycheck, feeling alienated by the rest of society. And what do they see the political class vary over? Privileged people with comparatively minor issues. Over a society, that's never been more tolerant to minority. Whether we are or not sufficiently, we're never getting more tolerant. But there have been times where there's been more income equality. There have been times that people have done when cost of living wasn't so bad. And so we see all these people feel excluded purposefully by the political process. And then we're surprised that they turn to increasingly radical political parties. Now, towards your two questions. So the first one, is it proportionate, the 10% of seats? I think so. There's a variety of polls that have been done to find what portion of population is LGBTQ. You get 5 to 10, I think some higher. Yeah, it's about proportion. But I think this also ties into a bigger issue, which is the idea of what people call lived experience being so important. Already the phrase lived experience is stupid. If you've experienced something, by definition, you've lived it, right? You can't experience something, in a TUI. But the reason that's done is to put more focus on it. We're making lived experiences and feelings more important than reason what can logically gauge.
Exactly.
So people now feel offended, whether or not the intent was to offend, whether or not they should feel offended objectively. It's very good. What doesn't matter? It's all about truth and subjective viewpoint. Now, how does this tie in to the point you were bringing up about selecting seats for people? Because the idea now is that your representative has to look like you, right?
Right, right.
Your representative has to represent you, not your ideas, which is what matters.
But we can see in the parliaments, for example, when lords represent the ideas that they don't relate in a way to. I've been working with one of the lords who is responsible for the question of Haiti, which is clearly he's not from Haiti, and he he might be the best person to actually represent Haiti because he has worked in Haiti and got a working experience, but it doesn't mean that he looks like Haitian people.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly the issue. So, people now don't think, does this person represent my ideas? Does this person look like me? Am I,
Yeah.
are they ticking the right boxes? And this is a very, very, very stupid way of looking at representation, looking at politics. Diversity of ideas is what matters, not any other sort of diversity in politics. Um, so, you know, I think that you see the Democrats consciously trying to foist women or ethnic minorities in for their candidates in America, whether or not it's the best qualified person. And you see the results. Kamala Harris was absolutely not the best qualified person to go the vice president or presidential candidate. She got there because of her status as a minority, and it didn't go well.
But the thing they can actually
say one more there. So, you also see a very, very worrying trend in sectarianism. So you've seen prominent areas of the Muslim community in the UK vote for candidates, who agree with them on one issue, Palestine, which UK has very little say.
Yeah.
Essentially because it's the same religion, essentially because they look like them, and so on. And you are getting politics now divided along religious and ethnic lines, and that is a very dangerous thing. If we're looking for societal harmony, we should judge you by the content of their character and their ideas, not by the color of their skin. And also, this only goes one way, right? People only ever want minorities to be represented with minorities. If you use the same argument, then you could also say, well, white majority countries should, have governments that represent them, which is a stupid point, which no one should agree with. And no one does agree with them. We're happy when we had a prime minister of Indian origin in the UK. But then the people don't also bring that logic to other minorities like LGBTQ people in your university who should, care about having representatives who represent their ideas, not their sexual orientation.